Hello world, and we are back. My name's Kyle Fischl, and this is the next episode of my poker vlog. We are outside the Sarasota Poker Room, One Eye Jacks Poker Club. I've been on quite an upswing lately, and we are really hoping for it to continue, and we're going to get right into some hands, let you know how it goes. First hand of note. We buy into the 2-5 game for $1,000, and on the first interesting hand, we looked on a pocket tens in the low jack, we raised up to $20. The hijack 3-bets us to 80. Now, he was a player that was previously playing the 5-10 game that broke, so maybe this game's just too small for him and the 3-bet has a little less credibility. Either way, when the cutoff decides to call, I'm going to call as well. Tens has plenty of playability, and we are going 3 ways to a flop, which comes king, 9, 6, 2 clubs. We do have the 10 of clubs, which is nice. Backdoor straight draw, backdoor flush draw, and only one over is not the worst flop ever. When I check it in flow, the pre-flop 3-better bets $75. Cutoff decides to fold, and for one C-bet, we're definitely not folding. My opponent could easily have ace queen, ace jack, even ace 10, and maybe some straight draws or club draws. So I make the call, and we are heads up to a turn card, which is the 5 of diamonds. Not great, 7-8 is a straight draw that gets there, but I don't expect suited connectors that low being in a 3-betting range, so we can kind of discount it somewhat. And when I check to my opponent, they check it back. I feel a lot better about my hand. I think it's more likely he's got just ace queen and did a standard C-bet, didn't work out, and now he's just going to check, somewhat give up unless they make their pair. And the river is the deuce of diamonds, complete brick. I check to my opponent. I'm really hoping to not face a huge barrel here, and he checks it back. So I feel pretty good about my hand, but he has pocket jacks.
Oh, God, that hurt a little, but I'm all right.
Starting the session in a 3-bet pot getting pipped is not a great recipe for success. But on the next hand of note, I looked out at ace queen offsuit from the small blind. The low jack is first to act, and this is not a straddled pot. He opens it up to $50, and he was also not one of the 5-10 players. So this is just a weird 10x open. And when it folds to me, I seem to always have an excuse why I'm not 3-betting ace queen, and versing a 10x open from out of position seems to be falling right into that pattern. So I make the call, and the big blind calls as well. Wasn't really expecting that. Really thought this would be a heads up pot, but we end up going 3 ways to a flop, which is ace 6 4 with 2 hearts. When I check it in flow, my opponent continues for $75. I'm never folding with top pair, second best kicker. I think my opponent often has like ace jack, ace 10 here, as I don't really think ace king needs to go 10x. I think it's strong enough that it can go a relatively more standard size of 25-30 in an unstraddled pot. I actually think this exact line feels more like jacks, queens, kings that got a pretty bad flop and are just trying to power their way through it. You do see that from time to time at the 2-5 table. And when I make the call, we end up going heads up to a turn card, which is the 8 of clubs. Even though 7-5 and 6-8 get there, it's not super worrisome. I just don't see those hands in the 10x opening range. And my opponent continues for $100. Story's pretty much the same. We're not folding to this bet. We're just going to call here and reevaluate on the river. And the river is a very good one for me. It's the queen of spades. Not because I think that I needed it, but I do think like ace jack, ace 10 aren't really worried about this card and are just going to keep betting. I don't really consider leading here as my opponent, 10x'd it and continued. He's repping pretty strong. Don't really expect this river to go check, and depending on my opponent's bet size, I'll be able to raise or just call. And when I check, my opponent pretty much snap checks it back and has ace king. Truly was not expecting to be behind here on the flop or turn, but I guess I'm just happy I got there on the river and we take down a pretty good sized pot. Following that, when the +1 player opens to $20 in an unstraddled pot, the low jack button call, I'm in the small blind with queen 4 of spades. Not a particularly good hand, but suited queen getting basically 5-1 on our money. We're not really folding this one, and the big blind calls as well. So we're going 5 ways to a flop, which comes 4 deuce with 2 clubs. I decided to just lead out here over half pot for $60, and the reason is I don't really expect to get raised here almost ever. Even if my opponent has like 5s, 6s, or 7s, I could just have a random deuce, and those hands don't feel too comfortable. So having a severe range and nut advantage, I'm not expecting to face too much resistance here. But resistance I do face as 3 different players decide to call. Okay, well, I'm certainly up against at least a flush draw, so we're really hoping not to see a club. And the turn is the 5 of diamonds. Based on the number of players that continued on the flop, someone could easily have ace 3, 5-3, ace 5. A lot of hands that actually beat me now. So if the flop was an overplay, continuing on the turn out of position in 3 peoples would certainly be an overplay. So I'm just going to check it, see what develops. And on this one, I'm very happy to see it check through. And when the river is the bink 4 of diamonds, I fill up. You might think this is the time to go huge. You made a full house. It's time to get paid. And I would disagree on this hand specifically, because no one raised flop or bet turn when they had an open betting lead. I don't really expect anyone to have a straight or a flush or even a deuce. I think if someone had ace deuce, they would certainly either raise flop or bet turn when checked to. So I actually bet very small here. Throw out $60, mainly targeting just ace highs and maybe like pocket 6s, pocket 7s. I mean, they can see the double paired board. It's not a great board for the over pairs, but for $60, I think the price is just too good for any of those over pairs to just fold, and even some ace highs might tag along. And I'm happy to see one player decide to put in the money. We get paid slightly when we get a pretty phenomenal river card, and we're quite happy to drag this one in. On the next fun hand of poker, with an under the gun straddle, the +1 raises to 35. Low jack decides to call and the big blind. Before it gets back to me in the under the gun straddle spot, I have ace jack of clubs. And again, this is going to fall into a just call line, mainly because the first player to act raised and then the second player to act called. They should have the tightest ranges in the table, and ace jack suited is not doing good versus the range they should have. I suppose you could argue it is Saturday night and most players don't even know what ranges they should be playing, so a 3-bet should be a good play as well. But on this one, I choose the passive route and make the call. We end up going 4 ways to a flop, which is ace, queen, 9, all diamond. As I don't have the betting lead, I check it to the pre-flop aggressor, who checks it. And the player with last position, he checks as well. So we get a free turn card, which is the 3 of spades. And when it checks to me a second time, I think a pair of aces is likely good here. But any of my opponents can have like 10 jack, random queens, maybe just like the 10 or the jack of diamonds. I think the king specifically probably puts out a bet here. So with tons of draws to get value from and a lot of worse hands that have showdown value that I'll probably call, I throw out a bet of $65. And the +1 player and the low jack decide to call. So we end up going 3 ways to a river card. And it is the 8 of spades. And now I think my hand is way too thin to go for value. I check. +1 player checks. If this checks through, I'll be very confident that I have the best hand. But now the low jack bets $100. I think this opponent could easily be bluffing with like queen jack, queen 10 with a single diamond. Because if my opponent had a made flush, he would have had to check back last to act when there's 3 opponents to get value from. Like any one of us could just have an ace or a queen and a single higher diamond that you would need value / protection against. So I don't think he has too many made flushes. I do think a straight is possible, even though I have a jack blocker. That doesn't mean a whole lot because it's not a diamond and they can still just have like jack 10 pretty easily here. With a player left to act behind, this should probably be a fold more often, but I just don't believe this guy. I make the call. Player to my left folds and my opponent shows 5-3 of diamond.
Ooh, yeah, that's bad timing.
He had a flopped flush and checked back when checked to on the flop, and didn't even raise turn either, so the risky line pays off on this one, and good job to that guy. On the next hand of note, I'm in the hijack. I look down at pocket 6s. With an under the gun straddle, I raise it up to $35. The under the gun player decides to 3-bet me to $135. I actually changed seats. This was the guy on my direct left who was in every single hand previously, and he is not going to lower his VPIP just because I changed seats. Pocket 6s I think is fine in position. We can navigate pretty easily post flop, make a set, make a lot of money, miss and fold. So I make the call, and we don't have to wait long because there's a 6 in the window followed by an ace and a 9 of diamonds. This is actually a very good flop to flop a set on. My opponent 3-bet. If he just has ace king, we're going to make a lot of money on this one. And he does not slow down. He bets $100. Nothing to do here but just call and hope he keeps betting on blank turn cards with a pair of aces. We do run the risk of my opponent hitting a flush if he had like king queen of diamonds, but we'll just cross that bridge when we get to it. The turn is the 9 of hearts, and now my opponent checks to me. I hate that he checked to me. I do think this means he has a hand more like jacks or 10s, as he played similarly with those kinds of hands when there's one overcard. So we're not going to bet very big here. We're going to bet under 1/2 pot. Actually under 40%. I bet 175. think this gets called from all pairs, all diamond draws, which I am happy to be drawing dead at this point. But my opponent doesn't take too long before folding. Hate the result of this, but I think process-wise we have to bet this. We got to put some money in when we make a full house here. My opponent could easily have some showdown value hands that he's just trying to get to the river relatively cheaply. And we gave him a good price to get there. He just probably didn't have anything. Well, pocket pairs were doing so good to me, I thought I'd upgrade it to pocket kings on the button. When the cutoff raises to $45 over an under the gun straddle and a +1 limp, I'm going to make this $150. Don't want to go huge with it, just basically 3x. Trying to get more money in the pot while we're in position with a premium. And our friend in seat 3, who we've been battling with all day, makes the call, and he is the only caller. We end up going heads up to a flop, which is Queen Jack 6 Rainbow. I actually don't like this flop. I think Queen Jack is very possible for my opponent. He would have raised Ace Queen, Ace Jack over limping. And additionally, we double block the King Queen and King Jack, which might limp on some occasions when you're super out of position. So when my opponent checks to me, I think my opponent either has me beat or he has pure air. So I just check this one back because I feel if we're betting, we're literally only targeting Queen 10 and Jack 10 specifically, which is a little thin. So I'd like to just kind of induce my opponent to bluff as he's been pretty aggressive today. And when I check it back, the turn is the 4 of hearts. And now my opponent leads for $150. He could easily have random pairs between the Jack and 6 that are just trying to protect themselves now, as my hand looks kind of like Ace King a lot of the time. I don't think there's any other choice besides just calling here, and when I make the call, the river is the 9 of spades. And now my opponent checks to me. Well, we double block the King 10, which is nice, and I think as played, I could easily have Ace King here for a bluff. So I think we can go pretty small here and get crying calls from all the middling pocket pairs, the Queen 10, Jack 10, 9 10 that bet turn when they just had open-ended but now have some showdown value with a pair of 9s. I bet $225, not too big, only targeting single pair hands, but unfortunately for me it does not take too long for my opponent to fold. But we take in a decent sized pot. At least kings did not get cracked this time. On the next hand of note, I look down at Ace Queen offsuit with a button straddle. The big blind raises to 30. Under the gun makes the call, and I'm in the +1 spot. And this will be the time I finally put in the 3-bet with Ace Queen. Think the situation warrants it. The big blind is actually one of the looser players at the table, and then the under the gun player only called, so he can never be super strong. So I raised it up to $120. My only other 3-bet at the table had been pocket kings. Unfortunately, it did not get to showdown, but still I should have a pretty good credible image to make this 3-bet bluff work. It folds all the way around to the big blind, who then basically min 4-bets to $250, and then the other gun player folds, and it's back on me. And now you know why I never 3-bet Ace Queen, Ace Jack, any of that stuff. Because either I just pick the worst timing ever and always run into it, or I pick the worst timing because my opponent just thinks I'm weak and decided to do a light 4-bet. Well, regardless, I think the suited variety we always peel, but the unsuited variety, versing a 4-bet can just be a pretty easy fold. And that kind of sucked. But luckily for me, we do take down half of a PLO double board bomb pot, get us back to basically where we were at before we tried our 3-bet. Before I look down at Ace 9 of diamonds from the hijack. With 2 limps, I raised to $35. This one was not straddled, so that's why somewhat of a smaller opening size. And on this one, the small blind, big blind, and the 2 limpers decide to call, so like most of the hands, we are going 5 ways to a flop, which comes King 9 7 with 2 spades. When all 4 opponents check to me, because I have ultimate last action, I'm in position against everyone for the whole hand. I think I'm just going to put out a bet here, try to thin the field. I bet $60 because I have middle pair. I should be the only one that can have Ace King here, so don't expect to get raised here too often, and we still get value from 8-10, 8-6, any 2 spades, and some weaker 9s some of the time. And in this bet, only the small blind decides to call, everyone else decides to fold, so pretty happy to take this heads up in position to a turn card, which is the Ace of Spades. Kind of dicey, the obvious flush gets there, but I make 2 pair, which is nice. And my opponent checks to me, and that's why it's fun to bet in position versus all these opponents, is we can control the pot now. We can just check it back and bluff catch river, or value bet when checked to based on the river card. And the river is a very safe 3 of hearts, very happy to see it. But what I'm not happy to see is my opponent bet $175.
That's great.
And this opponent had been so tight all day. I think this is the first hand I've seen him play And this size just screams made flush to me. Like, it's a good 2/3 to 3/4 size. The flush draw made it there. I expect a flush draw to check call. All the boxes seem to be checked for this to be a flush draw to a made flush. But for some reason, I just couldn't get away from this hand. I just think to myself, you know what? It's really hard to make a flush. I still beat hands like King 9, 9-7, the 10-8, 10-6, Jack Queen, Jack 10. After thinking about it for a bit, I think there's actually a decent amount of bluffs that are available here. So I eventually put in the call, and my opponent shows Queen 9 of clubs. So he did turn a single pair of 9s into a bluff. Not one I anticipated, but one that I'm happy to see as I take in a pretty big pot. On the next hand of note, I'm in the under the gun spot with the ace of diamonds, king of clubs, and without a straddle on, I raise it up to $20. On this one, the cutoff and the button decide to call, so we end up going 3 ways to a flop, which comes ace 6-6 with 2 clubs. As I'm out of position and I'm versing 2 players that could easily just have a random 6 or a club draw, we're going to be checking most of our range out of position, see what our opponents want to do, and we get a lot of information based on the bet sizes they choose. But on this one, it checks all the way through. Pretty happy to see that. I should have the best hand almost always, and the turn is the bink king of spades. We make 2 pair. And the really great thing about this card is if my opponent had like ace 5 where they checked back because they're worried about their kicker, the kickers for all the weak aces should not be a concern anymore. So I bet small, I bet $25 thinking that I'm going to get value from a lot of random aces, maybe some king X, maybe some pocket pairs between king and 6, a lot of stuff to get value from. And on this one, my nemesis for the day decides to raise it up to $65. To tell you the truth, this could probably just be a fold. The turn is one of the most face-up streets in Texas Hold'em. People will raise only nutted hands. They'll call with strong draws. They'll call with showdown value. Very rarely do they choose the turn to start making a bluff. Most players choose to start their bluff attempts on the flop and continue it through, or just start a bluff attempt on the river when they realize they have no showdown value and it's their only chance to win. But with that being said, I guess I do beat backdoor spade draws, which may turn their hand into a bluff. Maybe ace X feels great as they have no kicker concerns anymore. And we do have 4 live outs to better full houses if my opponent has a 6. When I make the call, the river is the 3 of hearts. And I check it to my opponent and they bet $250.
That's bad, right?
Now, if the turn was ever a fold, this river is certainly a fold. Like, raise turn, continue river is so under bluff. The only reason I choose to call this one is my opponent had been very active. His VPIP was probably 80-90%, and he had shown bluffs throughout the day. So having a capable opponent with a very high VPIP led me to make the call here, beat all other aces, beat missed flush draws, but on this one he just has 6-8. And in the moment, I just didn't think a 6 could check back the flop. Club draws to get value from, random aces, so much to get value from when you have 3 of a kind. But today it seems that players are being very, very passive against me, and it's letting them get paid off, so, you know, whatever works. We do win another less notable pot for a little bit of a rebate from that terrible river call before we look down at King Jack of hearts on the button. And when we straddle up to $10, 3 players decide to limp before we bump it up to $60. Taking it down now would be fine. Otherwise, playing a strong hand in position is pretty good. Well, 2 of the limpers decide to call, so I'm going 3 ways to a flop, which comes 4-3 deuce with 2 hearts. So we pick up a pretty good flush draw. I expect it to check to me, but my nemesis decides to lead out for $85. I suppose I'm probably tilted from the last hand where I got pretty much owned. So I decided to raise it up to $250. I expect this lead to be like 6s, 7s, 8s a lot of the time. Pairs that are over but kind of vulnerable. And against a range like that, I'll take my 2 overs and flush draw and we can play for stacks with the equity that I have. But luckily for me, it doesn't come to that. The $250 gets a little bit of respect and both players fold. So we're able to take down a nice little one at the end, which means we are into the game for $1,500, out of the game for $1,715, which is a profit of $215 across 4 hours, equates to $53 an hour or 10 big blinds an hour. Well, one takeaway we can take from today is that significant river action, your opponents often have it. As we saw in the very first hand, Ace-King chooses not to go for the 3rd barrel on the river when a queen hits. But my opponent does bet big on the river when they have trip 6s or a flopped flush. So this should be something that we take into account going forward. identify those who have the ability to river bluff, and then those who just don't, and their river bets are always relatively nutted. But on the bright side, we were able to continue the win streak. Quite happy about that. Happy to keep making videos. Happy that you are watching all the way to this point, and I will see you on the next one.